So before you start worrying about more followers, I think you should think more about community, right? Because community is where the future of content and social media are even going, right? And part of this is what I've invented called the 3-tier community system, right? And it's not like an official name. Like I'm framing it this way so that we can, work on it together. So this is the Still Growing Sessions. If you haven't been here before, my name's Terrence Harris. This is a platform that's intentional about repatriating the diaspora digitally, right? I'm a cultural architect, and so the goal here is to create the new mainstream by connecting the 3 billion melanated people around the world, right? When you in this business, when you in the entertainment and music business, they always trying to pitch to you that the mainstream is middle America or the majority of Americans, which if you have that limited Western scope, it's the truth, right? You want to reach the 300 million, predominantly Caucasian European people who you're surrounded by. In reality, those ain't the majority of the people on the planet or even closely related to or sharing your story, but this isn't one of those conversations. I was just laying the foundation of what the channel is about and why this is important to the conversation over just like followers and versus or with community. It's not like an and or thing. It's like, it's a fact, right? Online followings are just a synthetic or an artificial version of real life communities, neighborhoods, right? So on the very basic level, you're an individual, and an individual equates to a connection, right? That's what the share button or the comment button is basically imitating, is interactions that are made between one person and another person. Now, when you make a comment, typically, other people can see your comments, and that's why that lends to a form of virality. A share, typically when you share something with people, unless it's in a group setting, it's a one-on-one interaction. That's why you share things in a DM. And lastly, when you like things, you typically like things by exposing that publicly, right? So that's why everyone can see your likes, unless you hide your likes. And typically people hide their likes because they're not satisfied with who and how many people like them, but that's not this conversation either. So I'm just saying that when you're associating the idea of like, oh, it doesn't matter how big my following is, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing with a following. Like if you check geographically, and this is just backstory and, breakdown of the idea that we're going into in a minute, we'll actually break down what the 3 parts of this system for community is, but that's what the whole video is about, so we got to preface, guys. We got to lay some bricks before we start building the house. So, like I was mentioning, like geographically, for example, I live in Philadelphia, and that's 1.5 million residents here. That's what's documented. Shouts out to the Democrats and the Republicans. I heard they got some vibes going on about that, but documented Philadelphians is 1.5, right? So, million. And so, just think about that. If you had 1.5 million followers, people would treat you like you were a pretty outstanding individual. Well, that would be the equivalent of having the attention of an entire metropolitan city. I would think that's pretty important. But think about how little attention the mayor gets for being that same person. You know what I'm saying? And that just speaks a lot to like what people are actually doing with the followings, right? The mayor has the keys to the city, every public official's phone number and email address. They have all of the money, credentials, to allocate and at least propose ideas to anyone that they would like, yet they have little to no influence. There's most influencers in Philadelphia with 1 million followers could easily get more engagement and get a larger message out than our state representative or mayor could without spending any money whatsoever, right? They're going to have to put out flyers and campaigns and advertisement money, and there's a few profiles right now that I know who have 1 million followers. If they put something up right now, they're going to get 100,000 views on that before the end of the day. So this is the power of actually treating your following like a community and actually knowing the people, actually engaging with them, commenting on their stuff, right? And not just using it as a vanity metric. That's why a lot of people get so deterred by the ideas of followings and social medias and stuff like that, is because they associate it to a vanity metric, because that vanity metric was propagated to them. Propagated is just like an adverb for propaganda, and propaganda is just false information that people publicize in order to change the way you think about things, right? So oftentimes, people will propagate the idea that social media is steeped or rooted in vanity when, that's the furthest from the truth. It's actually rooted in some of the most intimate, private synapses and neurological experiences that you have as a human being, and that's why it can be a bit scary, is because following and presenting your content to them and all of those things can be scary for people, including myself, because it's a part of you that most people never get to see. It's part of you that you're able to create a mechanism of defense and interactions personally, because you've practiced that. You've worked on that for years, but when you're on social media, you're now exposed and revealed to people who have totally different tactics, understandings, and appreciations for your stuff. You know what I mean? So that's just a little bit of the preface. So let's break down the 3 parts of the actual community system, right? Like, how do you go from just living in these confusing or misunderstanding placements and then like actually get to a space where you can make your visions come true, actualize your purpose, live off your gift and impact people's lives in an intentional way. So the first thing we're going to talk about is identity. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, where like identity can either really be the weight of your journey. Like, a lot of people don't get started because they have a deep insecurity or frustration with like how they identify with themselves. So then it's hard to show up on social media, right? I've even struggled with this. I'll give you an example, right? One of the most challenging things for me on social media, not as an individual, I'm perfectly fine with being this way, but like it does not communicate well on social media, is having several different interests, right? We've lived in a world over the last century where people are identified with one title, and that one title you are supposed to be exceptional at, and that is where your reputation or regard comes from, how good you are at the one thing that you say that you are. Now we live in a world where we have so much access to so much information and the ability to like tap into all of the things that we enjoy or are interested in. And now I have a situation where I'm a hair enthusiast, a health enthusiast, I'm an advocate for mental health, I'm an activist for black people, I'm an art collector, it said I'm a jewelry enthusiast. Like, there's so many things that you do now that essentially it can be challenging to communicate that consistently online, especially when you're changing what you're saying all the time. So that's what I used to struggle with. I used to like have so many different interests that I wanted to talk about, which allowed people to deepen their relationship with me. We talked about the storytelling in like episode 4, I believe, around open mics, right? Like, sometimes this is just a good opportunity to tell your story. There are things that people come up to me and say to me that I don't even really remember saying, but had a large impact on them at some point. So getting straight with your identity is super important with translating like your following to a community, because once you find a message of something that you show up and say over and over, that's what people are going to identify you with, right? But you want to make sure that that's true to your identity, right? You don't want to have to do dances and you're not a dancer. You don't want to have to do like food reviews and you don't like eating that much. For someone like me, I probably every day I watch stuff about personal branding or sales. If not every day, close enough. So I can show up every day and just bring my genuine enthusiasm or interest around what the next topic or the next software or the next political event or the next corporate or governmental, like whatever is affecting your state of personal branding and showing up online in digital spaces and being able to create a product or a service, I'm all on top of that. So identity is the first pillar of actually being able to create, a community out of your following. Then the next thing is collaboration. And I think most of the time when people hear collaboration, I think they're thinking of like, how do I work with the people who help me the most? But it's not for the sake of you. It's so that you can show people, right, like what kind of person you are, right? It's showing people the quality of your character. I think Martin Luther King said something about that, like about racism, where it's like, when we're not judging people from their skin, but the content of their character, well, it's like people are going to judge you from your collaborations, not your creations, right? People want to be so seen for the things that they do individually, but most people are only there because they already are interested in what you do individually. the way that they're going to connect someone else to what they already like about you is you being able to show what you do that other people like outside of yourself, right? So let's say I'm Mr. Black Power, right? You know, people might identify me with that because they see me talk about something like that. Imagine if I collaborated with someone white, right? That would at least interest the white people to know, like, okay, well, he's about Black Power, but he's still someone who can, you know what I mean, speak to my interests as well because he speaks to someone who's white and who I'm interested in, right? Me collaborating with another Black Power person only creates an echo chamber of like, well, this is what we know he does, and now we're assured that these are the only people he does it with, and I actually already follow this guy. So now it's really a situation between which Black Power guy do I want to follow now, right? Which is the one that's more of the thing, I guess, that you're looking for, right? And mind you, I've never intentionally tried to be anybody's Black Power or anything, but I've definitely gotten that review before, so I'm just giving a consistent, like, example of, like, when it comes to identity, you got to be intentional about that. And then when you collab with people, you're not doing that to reinforce your own values. You're doing that so that you can show other people who share your values or ones adjacent or parallel to them that this is a place that they can come to. And maybe it might be a rest stop, right? Maybe it might just be a video that they watch. Maybe it might be a concert that they come to, or maybe it might be a friend they refer it to. But the collaboration's to expand your reach, not to reinforce the points that you've already made with the people who you already know agree with them, right? I'll go a little deeper on that one because I don't want to be shorthanded. It's like collaborations are essential to the lifeblood of your brand because, once again, people are going to want to know that you're human, but more importantly, it allows you to actually see like what's going on in your space. You know, if you're just head down working on your own stuff, doing things the way that you do them, you wouldn't know that there's another way to do them. I was just talking to a gentleman today online, and he was telling me and showing me different things that he's doing with similar pieces of clothing that I'm doing, right? He was showing me flare bottoms that he made from scratch, jean jackets. He was showing me stencils that he created from the grocery store. He was buying grocery store kitchenware and then using it to do alterations for fashion, right? So it's like oftentimes the collaborations can take you really, really far. And not just in the aspect of like with what you're already doing, but also to expand your knowledge and like be aware of what's going on in your space. He's in New York, so shouts out to Flip Hendricks because, you know what I mean, he got the vibes on TikTok too. So lastly is consistency. We was talking about this in a video earlier in this series as well, and how, but what does consistency have to do with community? I think this is my favorite one because a lot of times people talk about self-sufficiency, but their self-sufficiency typically comes from being committed to something outside of themselves. So there's no real self-sufficiency. It's self-dependency, right? Where you depend on yourself as long as you're being given something from someone else, and that you keep that relationship private, right? That's why often people with jobs don't like talking about how much they make, because that's a relationship that they like to covet for themselves, because the interest of what they're being given is not available to the people around them. And it's not a communal effort, right? This isn't in all cases, but this is in most cases. Go ask the 5 people that you know how much they make. And more importantly than the people that you know, ask the 5 people that you work with how much they make and see how that goes. So the reason why being consistent in community goes together is because being in a community requires you to not have to be consistent in the ways that y'all think consistency means. Y'all be thinking consistency means you got to put up 3 posts 3 times a week, or you got to exercise 5 times a week, or you got to just go super hard at doing something because you're relying on yourself to be the outcome, right? You don't have an idea that, like, well, on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, Mary going to handle that, and I know I can show up, and then that will be ensured. Or even if she doesn't show up Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, she might have showed up Tuesday and Sunday so that I know at least at some point in this week that that's going to get done. But no, you got to run to the grocery store. You got to run to the car wash. You got to run to the daycare spot. You got to go shopping for yourself. You got to research for yourself. You got to go find out about financial literacy. You got to get your own hair done. You got to meal prep. You got to do all these things in the name of self-sufficiency, when community was about you doing your role consistently and then being able to show up for others so that they can show up in their role consistency, and then you can like lend to one another without having to exhaust yourself. So consistency is extremely important, not consistency just for yourself, but consistency in the effort that it shines a light on the people in your community, and then that they know how to show up consistently, and they ain't got to be so worried about doing everything on themselves. It's reassurance. You know what I mean? Like, you know how they say discipline is the highest form of self-love? Consistency is the highest form of reassurance. You know what I'm saying? Like, you'll know somebody's really that person when you know that they be that person consistently. So that's my systematic approach to community building. Obviously, we could go deeper. We could unpack. We could unfold. We could tree branch outside of those three things. But I feel like if you really get really deeply in tune with your own identity and don't be married to it, but have it as a business card or a greeting card so that you can at least be able to attract like-minded people, and then that will lead you into the collaborations that can expand you, right? You don't want to be married to your identity, but you want to be sure about how you're showing up. You want to be, like, honest with yourself. You know what I'm saying? And that's what identity is like a state of being, but not your whole being. Being collaborative isn't always about just reassuring and reinforcing your own efforts, right? But it's also about being able to expand and shine a light on what you do for people who are not familiar with it. And you can do that by collaborating with people who about it, but it's like questioning you because they genuinely care and they have empathy for what you're talking about due to their curiosity. Those collaborations can really not only personally develop your, like, ability to have a following, I guess, or be community online, but just be a better person. And then the last one is consistency, right? The consistency just comes into play in the manner of, like, you got to show people that you can show people, right? So that they can show people. It's like, on some real though, not to play about it, a lot of times you're being consistent not only for yourself, but for the people around you. So the call of action today, or the question that we want to ask for the future, is whether or not we truly want to have a community, or if we want to have a brand. Because maybe community is not for us. Maybe we're not really building a community. I know Still Growing is a brand. I don't always associate it with being a community. I have some projects called the Creative Community where I lend digital products to the people who I know do the same stuff as me, so that, like, we could all make $100,000 annually and then be able to lend, you know, the space to one another, as I've mentioned, in our respective departments. But, like, community is a very strong word, and to be honest, I'm about to do a part 2 to this as far as about, like, how community has been, like, really perverted. The word community, I want to, like, draw a comparison between community and brand, because I think there's, like, everybody's just saying the word community now, and a lot of corporations picked up on that word, and now it's a little messy. So that's the question we want to ask ourselves in the future, is, like, is this really a brand, or is this a community? So I look forward to seeing how that play out in the future with you.